Well, the first thing I wanted to say, the Lease you better read that over again, Sam, the Lease, because these get signed today. Dave sends a limo to pick us up, buying lunch here for everybody. I just learned there's a consultant hired. I don't know what this job is going to be. A new assistant is hired. The staff has tripled in size in one day. You better read that over again. And you must have did a great job with it.
And the lease payments to the city quadruple.
Imagine that. Well, somebody's paying for it. We could do a whole nother hot stove luncheon someday, Greg, on the life and times of Dave Wellington. We'd have to have the Comerfords back for sure. But that video recorder could not be running for those stories.
That's right.
Greg is right. Greg has been down. When I first started, I started with the Bisons in 1987 as a PR director, and that was the last year at War Memorial Stadium. We now can call it the Rock Pile. We weren't allowed to call it the Rock Pile when we were playing there. But then my first real full season was in 1988 when then Pilot Field opened, and I can remember Greg coming down, being at all those big events, and he's right. He got behind security a number of times. There were times during the game he'd be down working with a hitter in the batting cage, and you'd say, "Who is this guy? This Greg Peterson guy who descends upon us every couple of weeks?" But the ballpark, which has a new name again. Hopefully you've heard of anyone know the new name?
Done.
Tire Park.
It's his third name in 12 years. It opened, we said, in 1988. I was thinking back to that first year, and Greg talked about a few of the events that we had there the first year, besides the first ever game, which was just tremendous, and we won the game 1-0, and our most popular player hit a home run to win the game, and the AAA All-Star game was there, and that was at the time the first ever AAA All-Star game, televised live on ESPN at the time to nationwide. At the time, of course, Buffalo was trying to get a Major League Baseball franchise, and it was important that the place be filled and electric, and you got all these future great players that are going to show up and play at the ballpark, and it was just a tremendous couple of days of events. But as we got down toward the end of the game really wasn't that good of a game. I think the score ended up being 3-2 or 2-1 game, and a guy by the name of Ed Urak was a player. He got the winning hit. It could have been an error. They gave him a hit, and it just nothing had happened in the game. Nobody had really rose above and was a star. So they're looking at the most valuable player of the game, and they're going to name Ed Urak as the most valuable player of the game. So he was playing, I think, for the Oakland AAA team at the time. So he's going to be the MVP of the game. During that time, if you all recall the controversy that Wade Boggs was going through with some personal problems that he was having with somebody. Well, Ed Urak was a good friend of Wade Boggs, and had actually been a part of introducing this person to Wade Boggs, who he had gotten into a lot of trouble with. So Ed Urak, the game's over, and ESPN's down on the field, and they have all the cameras, and they're going to try to do this presentation of the trophy live to him, and the gentleman from the sponsor is there, and they give him the trophy, and there's probably, it seemed like 15 or 20 media people. Greg was probably right there with his camcorder.
You'll see it later.
And they give him the award, and they're going to ask him questions, and the very first question comes from a writer that asks him about the Wade Boggs situation. And I can remember Ed Urak, who at the time was now an aging player, and he is going to charge this reporter. I mean, he's going to beat him up on national television, and we're trying to promote Buffalo and family entertainment and how great this AAA baseball experience is. And what seemed like he paused for maybe 2 or 3 seconds, it seemed like he paused for a half hour, and he finally thought the best of it and didn't charge after the reporter, and everything looked great on television. The other events that we had that year and then in future years was the National Old Timers Baseball Classic, which used to be held in Washington, D.C. We were able to bring it to Buffalo, and some of my greatest memories of working at that ballpark were the people that I've been able to meet that have come for these old timer games. people that I was fortunate enough to pick up at an airport. Hank Aaron rode in my car, and Warren Spahn was in the back seat, and Brooks Robinson was in the other seat, and I'm driving along thinking, you know, how does a kid from South Buffalo have Hank Aaron, Warren Spahn, and Brooks Robinson in his car at the same time? And got a chance to meet Joe DiMaggio, who came in for a couple of those games. Mickey Mantle didn't play, but he came through the ballpark, and these were guys that I never really got a chance to see play. I've only been able to read about them or see highlights, but obviously they're some of the greatest players that have ever played baseball, and to be able to meet them and to be around them for a couple of days has always been and always will be a great thrill for me. Everybody knows about the legend of Joe DiMaggio, but I have to tell you that there'd be maybe 20 or 30 of these old-time players would come in, and many of them Hall of Fame players. And there was a very set routine. Again, the game was on television, and you had at 8:07 the players had to be announced to the line, and at 8:08 we had to say this, and at 8:11 the balloons had to be launched. And I remember going over all of these rehearsals and exactly how it's going to happen. And Joe DiMaggio comes in, and I'm telling you, everything stops when Joe DiMaggio comes in. All of a sudden, this timetable means nothing because you don't do anything until Joe DiMaggio is ready to play. And this poor producer from ESPN is down in the locker room trying to get things started, and Joe was just not ready to put on his uniform and come out and wave to the crowd, and all the other Hall of Famers stopped. Nobody ever said, "Hey, Joe, you know, let's go. We got a game to play." He was the king of everybody who was there. Other Hall of Fame players asking for his autograph and bringing people in to meet him, and he spent a couple of days with us. And again, I never saw him play. I've only read and seen some video, but his legend off the field and just the stature of this man when he walked into a room, and to watch a room go silent and watch him literally stop a nationally televised event because he just wasn't ready to go out on the field, and it was okay because it was Joe DiMaggio. So those are some of my great memories from that ballpark opening. I have been in baseball, I said, since '87 on the minor league side. Started as a PR director. I was hired by Mike Buczkowski. The Bison's PR director in June of '87 had quit on like a Thursday afternoon. Had just decided that he didn't want to do it anymore, and the team was coming back into town on a Monday. So the Bisons needed somebody immediately to fill this job, and I remember interviewing with Mike, and basically I think Mike wanted to make sure that I had, you know, that I could walk and talk, and as long as I was breathing, you got the job. Can't you be here Monday? Let's get started. And I remember thinking, this is great. I had never played professional baseball, but my grandfather did, and I had always been around baseball, and kind of like Derek, I had never imagined doing anything else but working in baseball, hopefully. Wasn't going to make it as a player, so I wanted to work in baseball. So I come in on a Monday. This is my first day, and everything seems to go okay. And the second day, we have a very unfortunate situation. One of our players gets arrested for being caught with drugs in Buffalo. My second day on the job, PR director. They come in and say, at the time, our star player, his name is Otis Nixon, and has gone on and has played for the Braves and has played for a couple of teams. But Otis was arrested in Buffalo and caught with cocaine. And I remember my second day on the job, needing to go through all of what you can imagine happens when a player gets caught in your city with drugs, and and I'm thinking this is really not what I had thought this was going to be about. So we get that cleared up. The second week on the job, we're going to have our annual Beach Boys concert after a game at the stadium, which used to sell 30 or 40,000 people would come to the games. And at War Memorial Stadium, the dugouts and the clubhouses were not connected. You had to walk up, if you remember, if you were ever there, you had to walk up through the crowd almost and up into an area where the clubhouses were. Well, our players had wanted to, after the game, they decided they wanted to bring a keg of beer onto the field so that they could have a little party in the dugout while watching the Beach Boys. Well, of course, we decided that wouldn't be in the best interest of anybody to have the players out on the field pouring beer from a keg and watching the Beach Boys. So we had told them they could not do that. So they seemed okay about it. Well, the next day we come in and the players had called a few of us into the room and they want to have a meeting. They've decided they are boycotting the media because we wouldn't let them do it. They're no longer signing autographs. And we're not going to do a clinic that was coming up. We had 2 or 3 clinics scheduled. So that was my second week on the job, is trying to deal with now players aren't talking to anybody. So it was a rough start for me, but I've learned a lot through those trials and through the ups and downs of baseball. Greg had mentioned my grandfather played Major League Baseball. Huck Gary, I don't know if, I know if Jim knows him, and maybe a few others heard about him. He got to the major leagues with the Pirates for a couple of years in the 40s, and before that had played for the Bisons at Offerman Stadium, which again I was never fortunate enough to be there, but people told me maybe at the time the greatest minor league stadium of all time, a beautiful place and a fun place to watch baseball. And my grandfather came up. Derek talks about the Braves having a lot of teams. I think at that time my grandfather started out in Class D ball, whatever D ball was. Now we have short season A, but he started in D ball and made his way up. And one of the unfortunate things that happened to my grandfather, and getting your call to the major leagues should be one of the greatest experiences of your life. And Derek, I'm sure, has told many guys that they're going to the big leagues. I've been in the room when managers have said to a guy, "You're going to the big leagues tomorrow," and that's just great to see a guy get that news. Most of the time they think you're kidding and say, "Come on, don't kid with me about something like that. It's not something to kid about." Well, my grandfather played for a team in Minneapolis. I think they were called the Minneapolis Millers, and it was a AAA team. And of course, things in the 1940s were a lot different. You were actually owned by the owner of the AAA team. They owned your contract, and when a major league team wanted that player, they had to purchase the contract from you. Well, my grandfather played for Minneapolis, and the Pirates are going to purchase, I think at the time they purchased 3 players from the Minneapolis team. And the Pirates had called and had worked this deal out to get these 3 players. And lo and behold, the Pirates, the owner was short on money in Minneapolis, and he needed the money. Told the Pirates, "You forward the money and I will send the players to you to the big leagues." Well, he didn't send enough money to cover all 3 players, and the owner decides he's going to send 2 of the guys to the Pirates, and he's going to hold my grandfather back. Now by now this has been reported. These 3, young future stars are coming to Pittsburgh. They're going to make the difference. Frankie Frisch was the manager of the Pirates at the time, and these 3 guys were going to come in. Well, the owner won't let my grandfather go to the big leagues. So the 2 players show up, and my grandfather was the one that was the marquee guy out of the 3 guys, and he's not in Pittsburgh. So the owner calls and wants to know, and said he didn't send all the money. He said, "I realize that, we're going to." Well, they end up in a shouting match about it. Well, now because you didn't send the money, now you got to send more money. So this owner won't let my grandfather go, and at the time the newspapers in Pittsburgh started to actually ran a contest. If anybody knows where Huck Gary is, you call this number, and we'd love to get him here. We need him at shortstop, and pictures of the players looking under the dugout with captions, and they're still looking for Huck Gary, and he's still not here. And it actually grew from being funny to something that was very, very hard on my grandfather. They finally did work out the money situation. And you can imagine, a hotshot AAA guy showing up 3 weeks later. Fans didn't understand all these dealings and why he wasn't there. They just figured he was taking his time getting to the big leagues or wasn't ready to get there. So he had started out very rocky road with the fans and the media. My grandfather was a very shy person to begin with and just did not handle it that well. Frankie Frisch, I can't repeat the words that he used to use to describe Frankie Frisch's managing style, and my grandfather showing up. So it was not a good start for him. He ended up playing a couple of years in the big leagues and got some time there and met some great people along the way. As much as he didn't enjoy playing for Frankie Frisch, one of the coaches on that team was Danny Murtaugh, who of course went on to be a long time manager of the Pirates. And up until my grandfather's death. He was very close to Danny Murtaugh and kept in touch with him. So his career only lasted a couple of years, but it's great. When I was younger, I never really appreciated it as much that my grandfather played Major League Baseball. People used to come up to me and say, "Grandfather played Major League Baseball," and I'd say, "Yeah, he's it's my grandfather. You know, he also plays catch with me in the backyard, and you know, he's at our family parties all the time." It just didn't hit me that he was a major league player. As you get older, I think you appreciate that more, and you understand what baseball is about, how difficult it is now, let alone then when there were less teams to actually make it to the major leagues. And so as the years go on, I appreciate that more and more. And again, I did not get to ever see him play, so I'm always interested in talking to people that did get to see him play, either as a youngster in Buffalo playing in the Legion Ball leagues or in high school for South Park High School, and then eventually up through his minor league career. And every once in a while I run into someone and mention it to them, and they have a great story to tell me, and it's great to be able to do that. Kind of an ironic story also about his career. Later on, when we were older, my parents would take us to Three River Stadium annually. My dad worked for Republic Steel and had connections in the steel industry in Pittsburgh, and we'd be able to get tickets to go up. And this was maybe the late 70s, early 80s. We would go there, and at the time the Pirates had some problems at shortstop. Their shortstops were not playing that well, and we'd be in Pittsburgh literally 2 days a year, but we'd make an annual trip there. We go to the game one year, and again the shortstop is struggling, and they're running a cartoon in the Pittsburgh paper while we are there, and one of the signs, one of the guys holding up says, "Where are you, Huck Gary? We need a shortstop. You know, where are you?" So this appears in the newspaper one of the 2 days out of the 365 days of the year that we happen to be in Pittsburgh, and so it's great to pick up those tidbits, and it keeps me close to hearing about his career, and it keeps me close to remembering what he did, which was exciting. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions, or Jim, I don't know, you saw my grandfather play, maybe you can tell me something about the way you play.
I'm only dating myself, but no, but him and right. Yeah, I got to meet Dan Murtaugh. They were playing Forbes Field, Pittsburgh. We used to go down and see them play the Dodgers and all that. They had some great teams, and he was a great ball player. Anybody in Buffalo, they talk about Huck Gary. And I wish I knew the man more, But I watched him play. I saw all these guys. They were good, very good.
Was he around when Morris Mann was playing? Was he in
Yeah,
that?
Yeah, he was right around Warren.
Yes.
I believe they may have been at South Park High School the
They
same
were.
year.
Well, Warren was a little older.
Right.
He went in the service, and then, of course, and my cousin, Vince McNamara, he played too.
Sure.
And matter of fact, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
But he played with the Braves, and it used to be the Boston Braves at that time. Then they went to Milwaukee.
Warren Spahn.
Warren Spahn,
Yeah.
they all played. They were all in there. Yeah. And I met all those guys, and it was a great feeling just to meet them. Oh, great guys. They really were.
Nicknamed Huck because he was always seen walking down the street with his glove on the top of his bat, walking somewhere to find a baseball game to be able to play.
Well, you understand, we didn't have TV. Everybody's out playing ball all the time. No, seriously, that's what it was. Everybody played ball,
You didn't play a video game? Virtual reality baseball?
No one ever heard that.
Played until the sun.
That was the thing. You played with the sports. You went with the sports, and we were lucky enough to get 4 or 5 months playing ball. We played ball. Guys down south, they played all year round, where we didn't have that opportunity. But speaking of him and Spahn, Warren Spahn was one of the greatest. And just to watch those guys play, give you the goosebumps. And he introduced us to Lou Burdett and all those guys, Joe Adcock. He was a great ball player.
Spahn spent some time in the service, so he would have had probably
5 years. 5 years. He got a field commission. Good man. They were good guys.
Warren Spahn incidentally started his his professional career in the Pony League.
Yes.
At Bradford.
That's right.
And one of his first games was up here in Jamestown, pitching against Jamestown team, which had just moved down from Niagara Falls in 1940. And one of the games featured a guy named Sal Magley, who was pitching for Jamestown.
Right.
So, from an interesting local tidbit, 1940, Allen Park, Warren Spahn was pitching against Sal Magley.
There were some great ball players that time, you know. There still are, but I'm just saying, like Mike made the statement earlier, in order to make the major leagues, there wasn't that many teams. You had to be outstanding.